The U.S. banking system originally was founded to finance the American Revolutionary War, and most of the time since then, and most of my career in real estate, banks were the leading resources to help people buy homes and finance small businesses in America. But of late, banks have just become really quasi-government powerhouses, vampires sucking blood from the American economy, using smaller companies to do the heavy work and charging their percentage along the way, kind of like the mafia. I'm gonna get those details, but before we do, let's get our sense of where the market is in real estate and review some of the key headlines in the news. I'm Bill Gross, and this is my real estate market update that I do every week. So in any economy, you have two pieces. You have supply and demand. Demand is most clearly evidenced by interest rates are driven by interest rates. When rates are low, there's more demand. When rates are higher, there's less. And and supply is measured by the inventory, how many homes are available for sale. So on the buyer demand side, we can see the interest rates have, concerningly enough, inched up slightly in the last week, jumping up from 6.69% to closing the week at 6.92%. About a 0.25% increase, still below 7%, still below the vast majority of time over the last year, still in a range that's going to cause very good buyer demand, but it's inching up and we should be paying attention to that. Now on the supply side, inventory remains at really all-time lows for non-pandemic period, below last year, maybe the first year of the non-pandemic period, slightly by about 7%, below the prior years dramatically. As long as there's low inventory, you can have drops in prices. What causes drops in prices is too many sellers, and they compete by dropping the price. That's not going to happen with these low inventory rates. Now, in Los Angeles specifically, our market is becoming more into equilibrium. It's still slightly a seller's market. If we define using Altos research as an equilibrium at 30, we've been in 40, 41, 42. We've now dropped to 38 as far as their ranking system using multiple factors. So it's still a seller's market, but less so than it was a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. One of the key factors I see is price per square foot, where you can buy a square foot of average home for $793. That's down from $830 back in October. So it tells you that affordable homes are still holding up price somewhat. The higher end homes are much softer. Take a look at median days on market has risen to 77 days. Average days on market still remains over 117. So the market overall is less strong, still a strong seller's market, but not as strong as it was just a few months ago. So let's take a look at the news. In Los Angeles, there's a couple factors that drive our economy. One is, I think, the horrible regulatory environment, the laws that are enforced. And then we have judges who have to make those decisions on the laws. Last week, we had a court throw out a LA County eviction notice requirement. And so what happens is the county passes horrible regulations. It forces taxpayers, in this case, the apartment association, to file a lawsuit and then to win that lawsuit in order to get their rights. But it's nonstop expenditures of legal fees just to maintain their rights in Los Angeles. So on one hand, while it sounds like good news that they struck down this bad law created by the LA County, the reality is it cost them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get there. And it's a continuing war between our state and city and county government and homeowners and landlords. And as long as that continues, they're going to suck money into the legal system. There'll be less building of new homes, less investment in real estate. So on one hand, it's good news. On the other hand, it's evidence, I think, of continued bad news. Now, I'm a real estate agent. I'm a member of the California Association of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors, as well as the local association. And while overall I feel like we've done a good job, our associations now are being forced into a more political and legal mode. And the latest news out of the California Association is the CR is actually suing the city of Fullerton to enforce a state law. Now, I think everybody should abide by laws, but I don't know that it's our place as realtors or anybody's place as private citizens to enforce state laws on cities. The city of Fullerton has their elected officials. They make decisions. They're representative of the city. The other thing that's very troubling is in California now, we're now turning from a state where there was freedom and liberty and people had individual rights and then cities had individual rights that report up to the state. We now have a state that is dictating land policy to cities and forcing cities, especially with those that have done well historically, like Fulton and Beverly Hills, forcing them to have more low-income housing, more dense housing, more high-rise housing, more rental housing, housing for immigrants that those cities don't want. And so if you think it's good, then I guess you should be cheering that. But personally, I don't think it's good when the state is forcing local residents to enforce a policy that those residents don't want to participate in. Now, gang up on realtors, one is actually the real estate news industry. Subscription-based Inman, which is one of the most I think well-known real estate industry, real estate news services, and they have conventions, I think constantly is nitpicking and insulting real estate agents, their own subscribers. The latest article of that is, for a better buying experience, agents should look to Warby Parker. Now, Warby Parker is one of those internet kind of hip, cool name companies. They have fancy graphics, and they have fancy stylistic for the younger generation glasses. I actually bought Warby Parker glasses when they were newer. It was online. And what I can tell you about Warby Parker, a couple things. One is it was a lot of hoopla, and it's become nationally less than 1% of the market. I can also tell you that it's venture capital money, which in my mind really is vampire money. Here's a case where this industry is being attacked by venture capitalists who finance Warby Parker, who in 10 years, 11 years has never made a penny to pay income taxes. And so this is another one of those companies that they were founded in 2010. They've never made a profit. And so you can imagine if every company was like a Warby Parker, if realtors, for example, were like Warby Parker, there'd be no state income tax. There'd be no federal income tax. Who would think that's a good idea? Who would think society could function with companies that are designed to never pay their fair share in taxes? So again, Warby Parker, when they came out, their glasses were much cheaper. Now they're about the same price as, in my experience, other larger glass places, ophthalmology places. And in terms of their being a good corporate citizen, we have to be careful that we don't get more and more of these zombie companies that never make money. They destroy competition. They unfairly use monopoly power and finance as a weapon against other people in our local economy. So here's another one. Another common tactic in our news industry is race baiting. And here's Fortune magazine. They're big race baiters. Housing inequality, Black homeowners won't catch up at this rate for over 300 years, but they could with a 1.7 trillion affordable housing plan, McKinsey says. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, personally, I always felt that real estate industry was the great equalizer, that the commissions and the free-flowing nature of the business caused people to sell or buy to anybody regardless. And that's been my experience, and you're certainly welcome to argue that if you think you're wrong. But what I do know is that race baiting isn't going to help race relations. I also know, more important than all that, is that McKinsey's proposal of a $1.7 trillion program, where of course they get their billions of dollars cut, kind of like the mafia, that's not going to solve anything. If there's one thing we all know, the last thing the world needs is another McKinsey-generated government program taking money from taxpayers and paying it to McKinsey experts and government experts. That's not going to solve the race problem. That's not going to solve the housing problem. The only problem that's going to solve is McKinsey looking for more money. And clearly, Fortune magazine, big race baiting company, big supporter of government overreach, big supporter of McKinsey and their ilk, obviously is just wasting time and ink in that case. In the news this week also was Keller Williams having to settle $70 million for these real estate commission lawsuits. Now, there's a lot to say here, and I'd love to do a long, detailed analysis on the commission lawsuits. But a couple of things I will say is they're only paying this, and I think it's probably a smart business move, to avoid more legal expenses. Meaning what's happening right now is, like sharks in the water, attorneys across the country are lining up to sue everybody. And just the paperwork to respond to lawsuits costs a fortune. Now, Keller Williams basically, by selling $70 million, has given these blood-sucking leeches $70 million of capital to invest as they attack all the rest of the industry. At the end of the day, I can tell you two things are going to be true. One, consumers won't save a penny, and two, attorneys on both sides are going to make a fortune. And so this settlement of the lawsuit, I think, is a sad commentary. Maybe Keller Williams felt they had to for financial reasons, or for them as a good business reason. They can throw the money out and destroy the rest of the industry and maintain their competitive advantage. And that's their prerogative to do that. But what's clearly true is this is never going to help a consumer save one bit on their commissions. And one thing that's also true is the attorneys are doing this not for that reason, but to make their own money. Okay, next news article I found fascinating. Redfin continues, I think, with their fake data analysis. Housing market update, more people are touring homes, but that has not translated into more sales. Now, it sounds pretty reasonable to say, well, if you have more people touring homes, a percentage should go into buying homes. I think the truth is it is true. What's not true for Redfin is their data doesn't match up that way, so they write an article about it. But what they don't tell you is the data for the showings only comes from one company, Showing Time, who's in a competitive battle with other companies to dominate the online showing market across the country. Most showings in America are not done online. The vast majority still are done by calling the listing agent or texting or emailing the listing agent and outside of an application. Showing Time is some interesting software, and I've used it, and there's competitors I've used as well. But Showing Time by no means has majority of showings in America, not even, I don't even think, a statistically viable sample across the country, and they only operate in certain markets. They're competing with other software. They're competing with people who don't want to use and pay for their service. And so to say that Showing Time's data shows more showings, but the pendings are flat, it might be Showing Time added more accounts. It might be Showing Time operates in areas that are more active now than the nation. For example, in the Southwest, where maybe weather isn't such an issue like it is in the Northeast. So they didn't pretend to give you any reason why the data shows that way. They're just saying this one company's numbers are up and the pendings are equal. Therefore, it must mean people aren't buying houses. And I don't know why Redfin's data analysts always want to jump on negative news, but there's a clear case where the data doesn't justify the conclusion. Next, in terms of bad actors, one of the on their way to bankruptcy, hopefully not fast enough, is the LA Times. And they're really kind of disgusting article. Why is LA still letting single-family homeowners block solutions to the housing crisis? Now, a couple of things stand out about this. I think, Rag, if you want to know why the LA Times went from being a dominant player in Los Angeles to on the verge of bankruptcy and laying off journalists, this article is a perfect example as to why. So first off, LA is letting single-family homeowners have input. Isn't that democracy? We have a system. We have public hearings. And if you live in a house, you're notified of potential development, and you're allowed to put your opinion in, and then the politicians are to take in the account of the local residents. Now, the LA Times, I guess, would like to have their input just magically be the decision in Los Angeles, but who else should have more input than people that own homes near developments that are being put in by developers? I don't understand why that's a problem, number one. Number two, I love how the LA Times uses the word housing crisis to try to justify the removal of rights of homeowners. Because do we really have a housing crisis? What we have is the result of the Los Angeles Times, in my lifetime, continual push to make Los Angeles look like Manhattan, like the governing class in Los Angeles and throughout the state. The LA Times fantasy for Los Angeles is we all live in high rises near metro stations and take our public transportation to and from. And if that's the America or Los Angeles you want, that's great. But it's not a housing crisis when you purposely don't allow the building of homes, and when you purposely don't make the building of homes so expensive they're impossible. It's not a housing crisis. That's the policy that you're fighting for. The LA Times has been advocating my entire lifetime for a case where the average homeowner or the average resident cannot afford to buy an average single-family home. That's not what they want. And then they call that a housing crisis to try to justify not just the policy they want, but really in this case, they're saying single-family homeowners even have the right to object. Well, that's pretty audacious for a newspaper, which is probably why they're going broke. In another sign of the government taking more power from taxpayers and the government more focused on its own power rather than what's best for taxpayers, here's an article. The Federal Housing Finance Agency is to kickstart negotiations for the first ever union contract. So here you have an organization which would tell you that we have a housing crisis. Of course, it's one thing manufactured on purpose. And are they worried about helping more home building? Are they worried about people being able to afford homes? No, what they're worried about is specifically more pay, benefits, work hours, and other employment conditions, because in their mind, the biggest problem is government officials don't get paid enough. Now, these are the same officials who've been over housing policy my entire lifetime and have watched it get worse. But again, government officials no longer even pretend to serve taxpayers or the community. They are grabbing as much money as they can make. And in their mind, unionizing will give them more power and more pay. And whatever that means to us as homeowners, not really concerned about. Now, I started off this conversation talking about banks. And one of the things that happens is we really have two tiers of banks. We have the highest level national banks, Chase, Citicorp, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, who are really the kingmakers. These are the people now increasingly with more and more power running our country and increasingly dictating policies and increasingly taking international flavor, which helps other countries at the expense of American citizens. Then we have local and regional banks that are really under pressure. They're the ones doing the heavy work of lending money to homeowners, lending money to small businesses. And as the economy is stagnating, they're the ones that are suffering. So here's the latest example is banks rocked again as real estate losses mount. See, the large banks never invest in office buildings, retail buildings, things that Americans need to build businesses. They've been able to pull out of that business and leave that to the more entrepreneurial small and regional banks. But that business is unfortunately affected by the interest rates set by the major banks. So the major banks were happy with high interest rates. That helped them make money by getting more in their bank deposits, but it's crippled the economy. And one of the things it's done is it's destroyed the big banks' competitors, the small and medium-sized banks. And so what happens is they go bankrupt, and then the big banks just buy them for pennies on the dollar. And so more and more we're seeing more and more banks falling apart because they've invested in American business, and the big banks have really destroyed the economy for their benefit. Now, as if that's not bad enough, these big banks that control our economy now have the audacity to sue our Federal Reserve because they're not getting what they want. The Federal Reserve, concerned about the banking system, requires the banks to have certain reserves on hand. Now, keep in mind, it's ultimately our money as taxpayers. It's not Chase's money, Citicorp's money, Goldman Sachs' money. They're using the full faith and credit of the U.S. taxpayer, you and me, and they use our guarantee, and they use the ability to borrow money on our behalf by lobbying our Congress, and they use that to make money. And now they're saying, hey, we don't want to keep as much reserves as you think we should to be safe. We want to be riskier. We want to be less safe and have the ability to take on bigger risks. And you say, well, could that be prudent? Well, it could be, but here's the thing to keep in mind. These bankers get paid millions of dollars. They live like kings. They don't fly in coach, they don't fly first class, they fly private jets around the world, seeing leaders of the world and dictating policies. And they live like kings, and then when, if ever, the bank has a problem, they just consolidate the bank and get a job at the new bank. And so we're left holding the bag. They never lose. There was not one banker in 2008 of the top bankers who served any time for the greatest financial scandal in the history of the world. We had FTX, we had this huge cryptocurrency scandal with all kinds of companies involved in banking them. And nobody goes to jail for any of it. We literally have Jamie Dimon's Chase Bank, the personal banker to Jeffrey Epstein and his pedo island. And they plead guilty and pay a $200 million settlement to settle to girls being raped and being trafficked for Jeffrey Epstein's pedo island. And yet, did anybody lose their job over it? Did anybody go to jail over it? A banker? None. And so we have to realize that these bankers just increasingly want to play riskier and riskier games with our money. It's kind of like going to a casino and having a friend give you the stake. These banks want us, their friend, to give them more and more money and more percentage so they can take risky gambles that if they win and make a lot of money. And if it would look like they would lose, we lose. The US government picks up the tab and just adds it onto our federal debt. So these banks that used to be our lenders, used to be Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citicorp, actually lent homeowners and lent small businesses. Nowadays, they don't do any of that. They just really, I think, pull the levers of power in our economy, take a percentage along the way, and really at all costs, they should be avoided, they should be shunned, should be held accountable. And the last thing we should do is give them more of a money to play with. That all said, what's best for you? Well, it's a good time for you to sell a house. Let's get together, put a good strategy together that's good for you. And it's good for you to buy a house, whether it be investment or live in. Let's get together and talk about a good strategy for you. I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media. Or if you're getting this via email, you can reply, call, text, or email me. And as always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.